Greetings, my name is George and this is Peniel. I thought I'd read some verses from Acts 27. Now, at this point, Paul is a prisoner and he's being shipped with a number of other people. And John wrote the book of Acts, and I notice he says, "We were put in the ship." So John must have been one of the prisoners, and he would observe Paul. And it says here from verse 9 of chapter 27, much time had been lost, and sailing had already become dangerous, because by now it was after the fast. That would probably be a Jewish fast. So Paul warned them, "Men, I can see that our voyage is going to be disastrous and bring great loss to ship and cargo, and to our own lives also." But the centurion, instead of listening to what Paul said, followed the advice of the pilot and of the owner of the ship. Since the harbour was unsuitable to winter in, the majority decided that we should sail on, hoping to reach Phoenix and winter there. There was a harbour in Crete facing both southwest and northwest. Then the storm came up. And as I say, they had not paid attention to the advice of Paul and putting their own lives at risk. And I would imagine that the ship owner had profit in mind, risking lives because of money, slave trading. Jump to verse 27. On the 14th night we were still being driven across the Adriatic Sea, when about midnight the sailors sensed that they were approaching land. They took soundings and found the water was 120 feet deep. A short time later they took soundings again and found it was 90 feet deep. Fearing that we would be dashed against the rocks, they dropped 4 anchors from the stern and prayed for daylight. Suddenly they're praying, fearing for their own lives now. In an attempt to escape from the ship, the sailors let the lifeboat down into the sea, pretending they were going to lower some anchors from the bow. When Paul said to the centurion and the soldiers, "Unless these men stay with the ship, you cannot be saved." So the soldiers cut the ropes and held the lifeboat and let it fall away. So the soldiers did this, not the sailors. And this time they're listening to Paul because they can see that he was right about the coming storm. So they cut the ropes and dropped the lifeboats. So now they couldn't get away. They were pretending to drop anchor when they lowered the lifeboat. Now they cut the ropes. And Paul said, "Unless these men stay with us, your lives are in danger." They needed the sailors, of course, with their experience of having probably been in storms. God is very practical, you know. Just before dawn, Paul urged them all to eat. "For the last 14 days, he said, you have been in constant suspense and have gone without food, and you haven't taken anything. Now I urge you to take some food. You need it to survive. Not one of you will lose a single hair from his head." Having seen that the sailors have been forced to stay, Paul now realizes our lives will be spared, even if the ship isn't. And he tells them to eat. That'll give them the energy and the nourishment. See, God is practical. And it's interesting to note that they're paying attention to a prisoner, not sailors or soldiers. God was enabling Paul, even in a dire situation, to save people's lives. And even in difficult circumstances, God is still using us. And he was using Paul. After he said this, he took some bread and gave thanks to God in front of them all. Then he broke it and began to eat. Sounds like Christ in some respects, doesn't it? Give thanks for the food, break the bread and eat. It's giving thanks to God, even in the circumstances he's in, because he knows he's a prisoner and he's going to be tried, but he still gives thanks to God. Do we give thanks to God in all circumstances? They were all encouraged and ate some food themselves. Altogether, there were 276 of us on board. When they had eaten as much as they wanted, they lighted the ship by throwing the grain into the sea. That's interesting. Throwing the cargo into the sea, I presume, uh, cargo being food as well as prisoners. When daylight came, they did not recognize the land, but they saw a bay with sandy beach, where they decided to run the ship aground if they could. Cutting loose the anchors, they left them in the sea, and at the same time untied the ropes that held the rudders when they hoisted the foresail to the wind and made for the beach. But the ship struck a sandbar and ran aground. The bow stuck fast and would not move, and the stern was broken to pieces by the pounding of the surf. The soldiers planned to kill the prisoners to prevent any of them from swimming away and escaping, but the centurion wanted to spare Paul's life and kept them from carrying out their plan. He ordered those who could swim to jump overboard first and get to land. The rest were to get there on planks or on pieces of the ship. In this way, everyone reached land in safety. So again, God is in control. The centurion was determined to spare Paul's life. After all, Paul had effectively spared their lives with his advice. And I'm sure the centurion, who seems to be in charge, whose orders had to be obeyed, he said, "You're not killing these men." God had engineered the circumstances. And in our circumstances, whatever they may be, whether we think they're good or bad, God is in charge if we belong to Him. And notice I qualify that, if we belong to Him. But He's still in charge of all circumstances, even the circumstances around us. And I can look back over my life and see there were circumstances that I found difficult at the time, but God was still using them to cultivate character or cultivate circumstances where His will was carried out through me and those around me. Okay? And I'll leave you with that thought. And this has been Peniel. Amen.